want to take a couple of moments and just share just a brief devotional thought here with you. Of course, it's just a desire on my part to perhaps just bring some courage and some hope, some peace in your life. I mean, let's face it, we are experiencing something now globally like at least I've never experienced in my lifetime. And so here we are, we're shelter in place, stay at home, work at home. And so I thought, I would just take my Bible. I'm in one of our rooms, so this is just coming from our home to your home, to wherever you are right now. It's just a feeble attempt on my part just to share a word from the Word, perhaps some manna to help us on our journey through this pandemic crisis. So all I did is, I'm staring at my iPad. It's actually sitting on a couple of empty Amazon boxes, some tape up there holding it at hopefully the right angle. So I don't know, we're just gonna do the best that we possibly can. But actually the most important thing is what I hold in my hand right here with you today. And that is there a word from the Word that can just help us on this journey? And so I have my Bible, and it is open to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21. Now, this is familiar to you. This is one of those great signs chapters, and of course, there's parallel chapters in the Gospel of Matthew. It's known as Matthew chapter 24. If you come to Mark, it's Mark chapter 13. But tucked in the heart, so there's just something about the way that it is described here in Luke, because Luke includes something that just tucked in his great signs chapter is a verse that just resonates with my heart. And so I just want to share from my heart to your heart. Perhaps it'll resonate with you too. So the context, the context. Jesus is primarily peering into the eyes of his closest followers, to his disciples. There's a few others that have gathered around, because there's always a crowd that is surrounding Jesus. And I'm not going to take us all the way through the signs chapters. First of all, it would take up probably a little bit too long. Secondly, you're probably very, very familiar to it. So what I want to do is to get to that tucked away little verse that's unique in Luke, probably just as quick as I can. But because it's talking about signs, there's actually 3 verses right here in Luke 21 that the word signs is specifically mentioned. And the first time is in verse 7, where the followers are simply asking the question, so could you just share with us, speaking of course of Jesus, could you just share with us what are going to be some of the signs? And so Jesus launches in. I mean, it is just boom, 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 one right after another. But I'm just going to read to you. So here's another verse in which the word signs is actually used, and this is verse 11. And Jesus is speaking, and he says, so now there's going to be earthquakes, there's going to be famines, there's going to be pestilence. These are some of the signs. I mean, please. I mean, who would have ever thought that we would be talking about pestilence as a sign? But we literally, this COVID-19, we are smack dab in the middle of this particular one. Then you would have to go all the way down to verse 25, where he specifically refers to the word signs. And he says, now listen, so Jesus says there's going to be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. It's going to be distress of the nations. Well, obviously, this entire planet, we are in distress. There's just no question about it. And then Jesus makes, at least I think, this is a fascinating, it's like a pivot that takes place. It's like a paradigm shift, because he's gone now all through these signs, and he can peer into their faces, and he can see. In fact, he says that with people there's going to be this anxiety and this fear, and he's talking about these signs, and he's peering into their eyes, and he can see the reality in their faces. And so it's almost as if he brings these signs to a close. And then he gets to this verse. And this is the reason why I tell you, Luke chapter 21, you have just got to love this. So Jesus is he's just saying, I mean, literally he's saying that people's hearts are going to be failing from fear. And of course, the biggest reason we have fear is because of the uncharted future, the great unknown. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I mean, life is changing like every nanosecond on this planet. So he's just got through saying people's hearts are going to be failing from this just sheer staggering fear that just grips the heart. And then he makes the shift. And I tell you, I just love this, because immediately after he says this, so when you see these signs taking place, when you see these things happening, then Jesus says in verse 28, he says, now when you see these things begin to happen, I want you to look up. I want you to lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing nigh. So right smack dab in the middle of all these descriptions of signs that could just scare the living daylights out of you, in essence, Jesus says, he says, I want you to look up. Lift up your heads, because I know how this story ends. You're going to be fine. It's all going to work out. So it reminds me of a story. Look, I love this story. I don't know, I'm still not exactly sure why my mind went back and just sort of grabbed this story, because this is a story that goes back when I was a teenager, just a young teenager, living with my parents, beautiful island called Singapore. So they're living there, missionaries, so just going to school, living life. So there was a preacher, an Adventist preacher, evangelist, who made his way through Singapore to hold a series of meetings. And I tell you what, I will never forget this man. His name, C.D. Brooks. I'm telling you, up to that point in time in my life, young life, I had never heard a preacher like C.D. Brooks before. Nothing. I mean, listen, as a communicator, if you're able to capture and captivate the heart and the attention of a teenager, trust me, you've got something going for you. And that was C.D. Brooks. Amazing. So he tells this story, and I'm going to share this story. Now look, I'm no C.D. Brooks, so I'm just going to confess that right from the very beginning. I wish, if you're a baby boomer like me, there's probably a chance that you've had a chance to hear C.D. Brooks. But he just had a commanding, powerful voice, and he had a way of just the cadence of telling stories was just, I was just captivated by this man. But I'm going to tell you the story, because to me it ties in with Luke chapter 21, verse 28, what Jesus just shared. So it's a story about a young boy. He's tucked away upstairs in his room by himself, and he's reading a book. And it's one of those books that once you start, you've read these books before, right? So it's like a page turner. You start reading this book, and when you start in the first chapter, you've got to read it all the way through to the end. It's just that captivating. So he's reading this book, and the book is it's a paperback Western that he's reading. So he's tucked away upstairs all by himself. Meanwhile, Dad is downstairs. It's after a long day. He's sitting in his lazy boy, comfortable chair, and he's reading the newspaper. And as he's reading, all of a sudden, he hears some noise coming from upstairs. It's the sound of a voice. He can tell somebody's talking, and he's thinking, well, that seems a little odd, because he knows that the only one upstairs is his little boy. And this was before cell phones, so there was no cell phone, no landline in the boy's room. But he could hear the voice of his son, but it stopped. So the dad, okay, goes back to reading his paper. A few moments go by, and he hears the sound of his son again. It's actually a little bit louder now, and it's just clear. That boy is talking to someone. So Dad's now just a little bit more than puzzled and curious. So Dad puts his newspaper down, puts his glasses down, makes his way up the stairs, and he stands just this side of the door into his boy's room. And he stands there and he waits. And he doesn't have to wait very long. Now see, tucked inside, the boy is reading this paperback Western, and the hero of the story is a cowboy by the name of Wyatt. And so all of a sudden, Dad's standing outside the door, and the boy just lets out with a burst, and he starts to shout, "Come on, Wyatt, you gotta hang on, Wyatt. Don't give up, Wyatt. You're gonna be just fine. It's all gonna work out. Just hang on. Don't look back, Wyatt. You're gonna be fine." And Dad's standing outside the door, he's trying to figure out, good night, why in the world is my son trying to coax and cajole the hero of the story? And just about the time Dad was going to reach for that doorknob, make his way into the room, ask that boy of his, what in the world is going on? All of a sudden, the boy burst out again. It's even louder this time. And he's just shouting. He's shouting, "Come on, Wyatt. Hold on, Wyatt. Don't look back. I know how the story ends. I sneaked ahead and read the last chapter. Wyatt, you're going to be fine. It's all going to work out. You're going to be just fine. Hang on. Don't look back. You're going to be fine." And now the father understands. He says, bless his heart. The little boy is reading this book, and halfway through the book, he can't stand the suspense. He's got to know what's going to happen with Wyatt. So he jumps all the way to the back of the book. He reads the last chapter, discovers that Wyatt is going to be just fine. And so he goes back to the middle of the book again. And now he begins to encourage the hero of the story. "Come on, Wyatt. Hang on, Wyatt. Don't give up, Wyatt. You're going to be just fine. I know how the story ends." You see, I really think in essence, that's exactly what's happening here. Luke chapter 1 in verse 28. Jesus is saying, so he peers into the faces of his followers and he sees, there's this anxiety and there's this fear that's just sort of gripping the heart. And in essence, he's saying, hey, look, guys, you're going to be fine. I know how all this ends. You're going to be all right. Just don't look back. Hang on. You're going to be fine. And that's the reason why then he says, so what I want you to do is I want you to look up, lift up your head, because the story is going to end. Your redemption is nigh. So sometime today, I just want to suggest to you, I would just want to encourage you that sometime today, I want you to get off the couch, get out of that chair, and I want to encourage you, I want you to just stand up. I want you to just stand up straight. I want you to put your shoulders back. I want you to lift up your head. I want you to look up. Because you need to understand that what Jesus is describing here is a posture of hope. It is a posture of victory. He's not describing somebody that's sitting down and the shoulders are down and they're looking down and they're all despondent and they're discouraged. No, he's saying, stand up, put back your shoulders, lift up your head, lift up your eyes. Your redemption is drawing nigh. I know how the last chapter ends. You're going to be fine. It's all going to work out. And so by that simple physical act today, you are aligning yourself with what Jesus has already promised. Hang on. Don't go looking back. I know how this all ends. You're going to be just fine. So look, my friend, I just hope that this has brought just a little sense of courage for this journey that we are on, because we are journeying together, but most importantly, we are journeying with Jesus. He knows how this all ends. And he's saying, you're going to be just fine. God